300 workers in Anderson, Indiana, are building something they cannot name. The factory officially makes headlights, but the blueprints on their workbenches label every component with a false name. The barrel is a tube, the trigger is a yoke, and the firing pin is a control rod. None of the workers can tell their families what they are assembling. The official project name is Flare Projector Caliber 45, and the gun carries no serial number, no marking, no legal identity of any kind. It costs $2.10 to build, has fewer than 2 dozen stamped steel parts, and can reportedly be assembled in under 10 seconds. By late summer 1942, within weeks of production beginning, there are 1 million of them. 1 million guns with no name, no number, and no history that anyone outside a small circle of cleared men is permitted to know. The most produced American handgun of the war does not officially exist. America built 1 million untraceable pistols in secret, distributed fewer than 25,000, and when the war ended, dumped over 600,000 into the English Channel. The question is not why they built it, the question is why they drowned it. And the answer is darker than most production histories bother to print. According to some accounts, the idea came from Polish military attaché Colonel Włodzimierz Onachevich, who proposed in early 1942 that cheap weapons be airdropped to occupied civilian populations across Europe. The Army passed it to its psychological warfare planners, which had a plan on the table within 2 weeks, reportedly backed by Army Chief of Staff General George C. Marshall. The logic was ruthless. A resistance fighter recovers a pistol from the ground, walks up behind a German soldier, fires once at point-blank range, takes the soldier's rifle, and disappears back into the population. The pistol was never meant to win firefights. It was designed to produce a rifle, and then that rifle produces another. And the occupied country slowly arms itself from the inside. 1 cheap pistol becomes 1 stolen rifle, becomes 2 armed fighters, becomes a network that a garrison commander cannot map because it has no center. But that was only the surface. The deeper calculation dropped 1 million untraceable pistols across France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Poland. And German garrison commanders can never know how many they have not found. Every farmer becomes a question mark. Every doorway becomes a calculation. The fear forces the occupier to divert men and resources toward a threat that cannot be located because it cannot be counted. The weapon does not need to fire to work. It needs to exist in unknown quantity. The real weapon was the number. Designer George Hyde, working with General Motors, built the prototype in a 25-square-foot room with a handful of cleared men. The Guide Lamp Division, the headlight factory in Anderson, received the contract for 1 million units and finished them within weeks. Assembly was fast enough that it was likely the only firearm ever manufactured faster than it could be loaded. The factory that made headlights for American automobiles made 1 million secret pistols and went back to making headlights, and most of the workers never knew the difference. Each one shipped in a cardboard box with 10 rounds of ammunition, a wooden dowel for pushing out the spent case by hand, and an instruction sheet drawn in wordless comic strip panels. No language, no training, no literacy required. One panel shows a man loading, one shows a man pointing, one shows a man who is no longer being occupied. The instructions assumed the person reading them had never held a firearm and might not survive long enough to need a second one. 500,000 FP-45s went to General Eisenhower in Britain. The other half waited for the Pacific. Eisenhower made a straightforward military calculation. His aircraft were hitting German rail lines, bridges, and fuel depots, and every bomb delivered was measurable progress. Diverting those missions to scatter cheap pistols across the French countryside meant pulling resources from targets that actually moved the war forward. He authorized distribution of fewer than 25,000 of the 500,000 sitting in British warehouses. Generals Stilwell and MacArthur in the Pacific were equally unconvinced. MacArthur eventually requested tens of thousands for the Philippines. The bulk of the remainder went to the Office of Strategic Services, which preferred to supply resistance fighters with weapons capable of more than a single shot. Researcher Ralph Hagen spent years on his book, The Liberator Pistol, interviewing American, British, and German intelligence veterans alongside French resistance fighters. His conclusion: no written evidence exists that the FP-45 was ever distributed in any significant quantity in France. Of 500,000 guns shipped to Britain, only a small number reached neutral Sweden. According to Hagen's research, the most documented use of the Liberator in the European theater involved a 101st Airborne paratrooper at Bastogne who was handed one fitted with a signal cartridge not to shoot anyone, but to signal American armor trying to break through to the surrounded division. The most documented use of the Liberator pistol in Europe was as a signal flare. Eisenhower was not wrong about the aircraft. He was answering the right question about the wrong weapon. A conventional commander asking what a single-shot pistol accomplishes at close range gets a correct but incomplete answer. The Psych-Way-R planners were asking something different entirely. What does this gun do to a garrison soldier who can never be certain the farmer ahead of him is unarmed, who goes to sleep not knowing how many weapons are hidden in the village around him? Neither side was irrational. They were measuring different guns. One side counted bombs on targets, the other counted doubts in a garrison soldier's mind at 3 a.m. Both answers were right. They were right about different wars. The boxcars sat in British rail yards. The war moved forward without them, and then the war ended. What happened next is the part most production histories skip entirely. The problem in 1945 was simple and unsolvable. 1 million pistols with no serial numbers, no markings, no registry, and no legal identity, because every document in the program had been deliberately falsified from the start. In wartime, untraceability was the point. In peacetime America, it was a liability with no clean exit. Over 600,000 went into the English Channel. Boxcars that had crossed the Atlantic sat in British warehouses for 3 years and never left their crates for any purpose resembling what they were built for, tipped into cold water off the English coast. The rest were melted into scrap. A weapon built to leave no paper trail was disposed of the same way. The guns that survived did so because soldiers took them before anyone could stop them. When questions were later asked, the guns had no serial numbers, no markings, no documents that accurately described what they were. The same feature that made the Liberator a weapon in 1942 protected the surviving examples in 1945. The government had built the perfect untraceable gun. It turned out to be untraceable in both directions. Today, an original FP-45 starts around $1,500 for a damaged piece and reaches above $7,000 for the best examples with original packaging by recent auction records. Only a handful of waxed shipping boxes are known to survive, making the box rarer than the gun. A pistol built for $2.10 is now one of the rarest American Marshall handguns from the entire war, and it commands that price because soldiers smuggled it home before the boxcars reached the coast. In the early years of the Vietnam conflict, the CIA built the Deer gun. Same concept, single shot, cheap, chambered in 9mm, designed to arm civilians against an occupying force. By the time a small initial batch had been produced, the war had escalated past the point where a single-shot pistol made strategic sense. Shelved. The same argument filed again 2 decades later with the same result. Eisenhower was probably right about the aircraft. The Psych-War planners were probably right about the fear. The worry of a shot from the dark is almost as useful as the shot itself, and that is not a firearms argument. That is an information warfare doctrine that has outlived every physical gun in the program. The FP-45 Liberator won its argument in theory and lost it in practice. Built in secret, used almost nowhere, destroyed without record, survived only because a few hundred soldiers decided it was worth the risk. The government designed it to be impossible to trace. When they tried to erase it, that held up too. The comic strip instruction sheet is still in some of those surviving boxes. No words, no language, no identity. The most honest piece of paper in the entire program. If you think Eisenhower made the right call, or if you have handled one of these in person, put it in the comments. Subscribe if this is the kind of history you want more of.